The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from The World of the Sufi by Idries Shah. 3. Humour and the Sufi. 3 Part 1. In a Nagshbandi Circle by Raoul Simak. It has been said that ancient traditional teachings which we, for want of a better term, call religious, especially in the East, can be projected in forms which many people would not recognize as religious in our present-day sense at all. Psychology, self-development, social adjustments, the cultivation of certain arts and modes of thinking, these all form parts of the order of the Nagshbandi, whose members are found throughout the Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Indian and Malayan worlds. The order was founded in the 14th century in Bukhara, and its chief centers have generally been in Central Asia since that time. While the Sufis, or dervishes, are generally regarded as religious enthusiasts on the pattern of Western monastic communities, or else as individual poets or wanderers, this seems to be because only certain forms of their activities have become generally known. I recently spent 3 months with a Nagshbandi Circle in Pakistan, whose members refused to have any ideological contact with the overtly religious clerics, and entry to whose private deliberations and exercises was difficult. An important part of the studies was the consideration of the muller Nazardin corpus of literature, generally regarded by people in Pakistan as a series of jokes. The use to which the tales of Nazradin are put in Sufi circles, however, shows that the intention of the teachers is to develop in students a form of thinking which is different from customary patterns. The emphasis upon faith, discipline and ritual, generally regarded as essential in religious formulation in the world of Islam, is the concern of other specialists. I was most impressed by these techniques. Whether or not they have any spiritual validity as a part of a way to universal truth, the application of this study system has undeniable effects upon those taking part. They seem to suffer from little sectarian bias, and in fact insist that different religions are external shapes within which, from time to time, eternal truths have been preached and made to work within man. This outline is intended to describe some of the stories used in this system, and the interpretation put upon them by the teachers. The first story is when Nazradin falls from his roof onto a man in the street. The man's neck is broken, but the muller is not hurt. The teaching is, this goes against expected cause and effect. Similarly, there is a system of understanding in the world which you can attach yourself to when you can realize that cause and effect need not enter into it. In the second story of the series, Nazradin is made to say, I never tell the truth. The explanations include, if this is true, he is lying. If it is untrue, he does tell the truth. Note that by wordplay we can arrive at anything, but this can never be truth. In the third story, the muller illustrates that man tries to improve on his knowledge, his techniques, his capacities in life, but he may lack other basic knowledge without which he is in fact doing harm. Nazradin finds a hawk with a curved beak and talons. He has only seen pigeons before, so he thinks that this bird is deformed. He cuts its claws and beak until they are straight. This, goes the moral, is what you try to do with metaphysical teaching. You try to fit it into preconceptions. If you realize this, you will truly start to learn. Certain levels of human understanding cannot be attained, it is claimed, until the brain can work in more than one way. This is the equivalent of the result of what is in some systems a mystical illumination process. But the Naqshbandis appear to hold that the brain is prepared by degrees without this illumination being as violent an experience as in other methods. The problem of time and of justice and injustice is illustrated by the contention that, whereas ordinary man believes that reward and punishment follow actions, these Sufis hold that there is a different time system at work concurrently. In other words, something that seems to follow something else may in fact precede it in another time system which is in fact with us. This principle is illustrated by the tale of the bathhouse. Muller Nazradin visits a bathhouse where the man in charge treats him badly, getting a gold piece for his pains. On the next visit, the man waits on the muller hand and foot, but he only gets a copper coin. "This coin," says the muller, "is for the treatment which you gave me the first time. You have already had the gold coin which was payment for the second visit." These dervishes believe very strongly in this dogma. A man may be given great advantages, for instance, which he must regard as payment for something which he has to do. The converse may also be true. If the Naqshbandis seem to be projecting an image of a series of experiences of an invisible world parallel to ours, they also stress strongly the need to be aware of the real events in this time system. In the story of the cloak, Nazradin is admitted to a certain feast because the doorkeepers are impressed by the regal garb which he has assumed for the purpose. He comments upon this by feeding some of the food to his cloak. "You got me in, here is your share," he says to it. The teaching underlying this is given thus: make sure that you realize the true cause and effect situation when you are in one. Do not mistake one thing for another. Self-deception and unfounded assumptions are held by this circle to prevent the attainment of higher knowledge. There is a tale which is used to illustrate this. Nazradin says, "The king addressed me. Everyone is impressed because they assume that something important must have been said. In fact, however, the king had only said, 'Get out of my way.' In this story, the assumption is laid bare. So is the self-deception, because the listener deceives himself into thinking that something important must have happened. In real life, man does not carry his thinking through to a point where he will see that he deceives himself. In this case, by feeling interested that he knows someone who has been spoken to by a king. Things are actually happening in the world, and especially among the human race, which cannot be explained and which have to be experienced. So runs the Naqshbandi creed. One day, Muller Nazradin saw some people approaching. Fearing that they might be robbers, he ran away and lay down in an open grave nearby. The travellers, their curiosity aroused by this strange behaviour, crowded around him and asked him why he was there. His answer illustrates the impossibility of answering some questions. You are here because of me, and I am here because of you. But the Naqshbandis teach in many different ways, in addition to this Nazardine joke system. Whom they teach and by what method will depend upon factors which they say have to be decided by the teacher. For this reason, they are often accused of not sticking to one formula. They have no dogmas, only objectives, as one teacher put it. When I inquired into this aspect of the teaching, which was quite new to me, I was told this joke as an answer. Nazradin went into a shop. He said to the shopkeeper, "Have you flour?" "Yes." "And milk and sugar and honey?" "Yes." "Then for heaven's sake, why don't you make sweetmeats?" The moral, of course, was that a man may have certain things and may need certain other things. But what each man has and what he needs will vary, according to his individuality and other factors. 3 Part 2 45 Adventures of Mullah Nazradin. How far to Samakhand? Someone said to Nazradin, "How far is it to Samakhand?" "Well," said the mullah, "it used to be 3 days' march from here. What with the changes going on these days, I expect it is about 4 days' march by now." How to learn. How is it that you have learnt so much, mullah? By talking a lot. I string together all the words I can think of. When I get interesting, I can see the respect on other people's faces. When that happens, I start making mental notes of what I have said. The drunk. Mullah Nazradin went up to a drunken man and started to try to help him walk. The man said a few words to the mullah, and Nazradin walked away, nodding. Some spectators asked, "Why did you not help him, mullah?" "Oh," said Nazradin, "he explained everything to me. The houses are going around and around. As soon as he sees his own house appear, he will leap in at the door. In that way, he won't have to walk home." One thing at a time. Nazradin was digging a pit in the garden. "What are you doing?" his wife asked him. "I want to get rid of this pile of earth I have left over from digging in the turnips." "But what will you do with the soil left over from the disposal pit?" "If you were at my level of understanding, you would realize that I am above such minor points." Lost property. Nazradin's wife suffered from bouts of ill temper. When this happened, people usually became very frightened. One day some neighbours came running to the tea house. "Quickly, Nazradin," they cried, "your wife has lost her wits." "Lost property is the concern of the police," said Nazradin, "and for my part I shall testify, if suspected, that I never knew she had any." Man of Truth. Nazradin was about to be sworn in during a court case. The clerk of the court objected to him as a witness, saying, "We cannot allow a perjurer as a witness. One of the famous claims of Nazradin is, 'Truth is something which I never speak.'" "The matter is quite simple," said the mullah. "I know dozens of people who are thoroughly reliable in this sense. All you have to do is swear them in instead." The well and the water. One man bought a well from another. When, however, the buyer wanted to draw water from the well, the crafty original owner said, "You have bought the well, not the water." The case came to Nazradin to judge. As soon as the details of the case had been read out, everyone in court craned forward to see how the mullah would deal with this one. Without a moment's hesitation, Mullah Nazradin said, "The well has been sold without water. Of course, the seller has no right to store his water in someone else's well. He will immediately remove all the water from it, or else forfeit all claim to the water." Men and women. "I have been in places," Nazradin was informing the people in the tea house, "where it is so hot that nobody can bear clothes next to the skin." "Then how do they tell men from women, mullah?" asked one of the patrons. "Well, they can't. Not in that country." Snakebite. "Why do you want snakebite treatment, mullah?" "Well, I picked up a stick I thought was a snake." "But that wouldn't bite you." "But what about the real snake I picked up to hit the stick with?" As I thought. Nazradin was convinced that Hamza was the greediest man in the world. Someone had told him that Hamza simply couldn't stop taking things. "He does it all the time. You'll never see our Hamza when he isn't eating or taking something." One day the muller saw Hamza walking along the road. "What are you up to now, Hamza?" he called. "I'm only taking the air." "Good heavens!" shouted Mullah Nazradin. "Can't you leave anything alone?" Stand-in. A schoolmaster owed Nazradin some money, and the mullah went to collect it. "I have the money at home, mullah, but I cannot give it to you now. I have to teach the class." The mullah watched the lesson for a few minutes, then he said, "I have the solution, schoolmaster. I'll stay here and nod and shake my head on your behalf, while you slip home for the money." What cream cakes are for. Nazradin was starving when he came across a shop full of delicious cream cakes. He was just stretching out his hand to touch one when the baker stopped him. "Are they yours?" asked the mullah. "Yes, they are, all of them," said the baker. "Then why, for the sake of Providence, why don't you eat them?" The brain is safe. Nazradin had joined the army. He was wounded in battle by a slash in his head. He was carried to a doctor. Before the doctor could say anything, Nazradin cried out, "At least we can be sure that it has not harmed the brain." "We cannot know that," said the doctor, "until I have made my examination." "Oh, yes, we can," said Nazradin. "If my head had not been solid bone, I would have not been such a fool as to volunteer for all this." Nazradin in the Land of Fools. When Mullah Nazradin was on his travels, he chanced to stray into the Land of Fools. The people asked him what his work was, and when he said, "I am a judge," they made him a judge there. One day a couple of men came before him to have a particularly tricky case tried. The first man said, "I am the plaintiff. This man asked me to help him cross a river ford. I said, 'What will you give me if I help you?' He answered, 'Nothing.' On that basis I helped him, but when we got to the other side of the river, he said he could not give me what I had been promised." "That is so," said the other man. "I admit I spoke rather without thinking. When I promised him nothing, I did not realize that I hadn't got any of it." "Oh, that's all right," said the mullah. "We have a fund of the very stuff here for the settlement of matters like this. Now, plaintiff, just take up the corner of that carpet, will you?" The man rolled back the carpet. "What do you see underneath?" "Nothing." "Splendid. It's all yours. Take as much as is your due and go home, both of you, there's good fellows." Straight line. "What is the shortest route to the palace, mullah?" "The very shortest?" "Yes, if I want to go there." "If you want to go there, the very shortest is no good to you." "Why not?" "The very shortest route is getting yourself born into the right family." Let's leave it at that. Once a neighbour asked Mullah Nazradin to look after a jar for him. The mullah could not restrain his curiosity and opened it. At first, taking just a lick, he had eaten all the honey in a few days. When the neighbour came and found his jar empty, he angrily asked where the honey had gone. "If you didn't ask me, I wouldn't have to explain it to you," said Nazradin. "Couldn't we leave it at that?" Lucky it's mine. The muller's little boy was naughty. Nazradin threw some water over him. His wife furiously upbraided him for losing his temper with a child. "He is lucky he is my own," said Mullah Nazradin, "because if he had been someone else's, I don't know what I would have done." Honey. Nazradin said to his wife, "Honey is delicious, curative, precious, beautiful, quite my favourite thing." His wife said, "What about it?" Nazradin started again. "Just a moment, I haven't finished. Honey is bad for you, causes disease, is made by insects, and is therefore unwholesome." "How can you have two conflicting opinions about the same thing?" "I only have one of these opinions. I'll tell you which one it is as soon as you've told me whether there is any honey in the house." Nazradin's brother. "They say," said the timid traveller, "that if you speak against certain dervishes, something terrible happens to you." "That is nonsense," said Mullah Nazradin, "and I can prove it." He took out a matchbox. Inside was a small frog. "This is my brother. He doesn't look quite the same since he criticized a dervish, but he is in the very best of health and he needs to eat much less. In fact, they say that frogs live for 100 years, so he is that much better off." Light. "Surely the sun is the greatest of all things," said a sun worshipper, "for it makes everything visible. What can we not see by the light of the sun?" "Simple," said the mullah. "One of the most extensive of all things is invisible in sunlight." "And what is that?" "Darkness." His porterage. Nazradin hired a porter to carry home some baskets from the market. When they were in the maze of alleyways of the town, the porter took to his heels and disappeared. The mullah told all his friends. One day, weeks later, he and a friend were in the market when Nazradin said, "Quick, let us hide, there is the porter." "But why don't you ask him for your goods?" "I might get my goods from him, but supposing he asked for several weeks' porterage?" The well. Nazradin met a friend on the road. "Will you do something for me?" "Certainly, Mullah. What is it?" "There is a man who has fallen into a well over there. I'm going to get him a rope. Please go and tell him not to go away until I get back." Wool and sand. Nazradin was leading his donkey, heavily laden, along a road. A traveller asked him, "What have you in those saddlebags?" "One has wool, the other sand to balance the first." "But you could lighten your load by throwing away the sand and dividing the wool into equal weights to balance each other." "You must be a genius," said Nazradin, and he did as the man suggested. They continued on their journey. After a little time, the mullah looked at his companion and said, "You are poorly dressed. Surely this must be from choice, since you are so clever." "No, it is not." "Then you are a king or a mystic sage. Perhaps you have been bewitched by some magician." "No." "Then you are a poor man?" "Yes, of course I am." Nazradin started to put all his wool back into one saddlebag. "Fill this other sack with sand from the roadside," he said, "because if your knowledge has put you into poorer clothes than even I have, I'd be better off with my old ways." Poison. The sweetmeat vendor was urgently called away from his stall in the market, and there was nobody to look after it. He saw Nazradin hovering nearby, so he quickly scribbled a notice, "Danger, I have poisoned everything here." Nazradin came closer and read the sign. They have curious habits in this marketplace, he thought. But after all, has it not been said, in a country follow the customs of the country? He made a small purchase of arsenic powder, tipped it over the sweetmeats, and added a line, "So have I." Why the muller never had halva. In the tea house, the subject of halva cropped up. Everyone gave his own recipe, and several people spoke of great halvas they had tasted. Nazradin said nothing. Someone asked, "What have your experiences been with halva, muller? They must be memorable." "Memorable they are," said Nazradin, "for I have never had any." "But how could that happen? Everyone has had halva. Haven't you ever made it at home?" "When I have been at home, we never had butter, flour, and sugar all at the same time." "Surely there is nowhere that does not at some time have all three." "Yes, there must have been some such times in my home, but I was never at home on those occasions." Storage problem. A local gossip sought out the muller. "Can you keep a secret, Nazradin?" "I am afraid that I have no space for any at the moment," said the muller. "You see, one has to protect oneself against other people's storage problems." No drunks. Mullah Nazradin said one day to the king, "I have never seen a drunk in my life." "Then perhaps you keep off the streets at night and drink alone?" "No, I am always in company." "Then how can it come about that you never see anyone drunk?" "I am always the first to pass out." Out with the light. The midwife was called to Mullah Nazradin's wife. She hurried into the house, went into the bedroom, and soon afterward, as night was falling, put her head around the door to command the anxious mullah to bring a candle at once. Nazradin took her a lighted candle. In a very few minutes the midwife called out, "It's a boy!" Nazradin was delighted. 5 minutes later, to his surprise, came the cry, "Mullah, another boy!" "Excellent!" shouted the mullah. A few moments afterward, the voice of the midwife came again, "Now a girl, Nazradin!" Mullah Nazradin rushed into the room and blew out the candle. "Why on earth are you doing that?" "Midwife, surely the candle has done its duty, and now it doesn't know where to stop." In the cellar. The mullah went down into his cellar, forgetting that he had left all sorts of bits and pieces there. As soon as his foot touched the floor in the gloom, a large sieve bounced up and hit him on the head. The more he tried to fight it off, the more it seemed to bounce back at him. Nazradin bounded back up the cellar stairs and shouted down, "You are brave enough in the dark, but come up here into broad daylight, bringing all the sieves on earth, and see whether you can prevail over me, Mullah Nazradin." How to pay debts. A passing creditor came to the mullah for his money. "I cannot pay the debt yet," said Nazradin. The man became angry. "Why do you borrow money if you can't repay it?" "It is a matter of the thorn thickets I am working on, you see." "What have thorn thickets got to do with paying me back?" "Simple. I am going to plant them on both sides of this street." "Are you mad as well as everything else?" The man was really enraged now. No, it is to get money to pay you back. From thorns? No, but when sheep pass, some of their wool will stick to the thorns. I will collect it and sell it, and then I'll be able to pay you back. At this absurd idea, the creditor started to laugh. Yes, said Muller Nazradin, you begin to be in a better humour now, don't you, when you feel the certitude of money in the offing? Accident. Muller Nazradin, trying to spring onto the back of a horse which he saw as he passed a field, fell heavily. People must have seen me, he thought, and before looking up he shouted, Accidents can happen to anyone. Then he saw that he was alone. All right, said the Muller to the horse. I admit I cannot ride, but don't you tell anyone. Known it long enough. Once a large earthenware pot was stolen from Nazradin's neighbour. The Muller was called to court to confirm that it really did belong to the owner. I can identify this pot quite positively, he said, for have I not known it since it was only a little bowl? Books and rabbits. Most of the things that people do are just the same as animals do, only they think they are different, pronounced Nazradin in the tea-house. That is ridiculous, snorted a visiting monk. If you were right, rabbits would be writing books. I am firmly persuaded, said Nazradin calmly, that rabbits would write books if only they would forget, from time to time, the pressing desire to eat lettuce. Stolen. 1 rusty coin. The Muller found a rusty coin by the roadside. He took it to the market, where a jeweller said, This is a valuable antique, and gave him 5 silver pieces for it. I'll invest this in cloth, thought Nazradin. A merchant, anxious to get rid of some surplus material, sold him his entire stock of rough felt for 5 silver pieces. As soon as it was his, the buying agents of a certain king, about to start a military campaign and needing uniform fabric, bought it for 1,000 silver pieces. While Nazradin was counting his money, a silversmith, who had a special order to complete in a hurry, gave him 500 gold pieces for the silver, far in excess of the value of the coins. Nazradin took his gold and started homeward. Just at the gate of his house, a robber held him up and took the bag of gold. His wife came rushing to the door. What was the extent of your loss, Muller? Nazradin shrugged. A rusty coin I picked up this morning. Miraculous remedy. Ill in bed and coughing incessantly, Nazradin called a physician. The doctor prescribed a bronchial mixture. That will put you right, Muller. But will it make me normal? Certainly. Doctor, when I have taken the medicine, will I be able to sing in tune? Of course. Why did I not meet you before? I have never been able to sing a note all my life. Hot and cold. Nazradin's wife told him to go to the Turkish baths one day. The baths were very hot, and the Muller roasted. On the way home, he was soaked in freezing rain. When he was almost home, he met a friend. Muller, said the other man, my wife has just told me to go to buy some meat. Never do what women say, said Nazradin. If you don't want to be burnt and then frozen, that's my experience. Then and now. It is said that Muller Nazradin lived for 500 years before he started to become ancient. He used to sit at a crossroads, nodding himself to sleep and jerking awake again. One day, a countryman passing by said, "What have you seen, Muller?" "I saw hundreds of invaders swarm up that valley yonder, sword in hand they were. I had to rush down to repulse them." "Why did you not call me for help?" "Who would have heard me? It was 140 years ago." What I need. "I am going to the shops, Muller. Is there anything you need?" "Yes." "What is it?" "A haircut." Ground wheat. "Once," said Muller Nazradin, "I had a marvellous idea." "What was that?" "Well, it was to eat ground wheat, but it only had one snag." "What was that?" "I didn't like the taste of it." Quantity and quality. Nazradin was taking a donkey load of grapes to market. Groups of small children kept begging grapes, but he only gave them a small handful each. "You are mean, Nazradin," they shouted. "Not at all," said the mullah. "I am doing this to illustrate the silliness of children. All these grapes taste the same. Once you have had some, you know what all the rest are like, so it doesn't matter whether you have many or just a few." Bad environment. Once, Nazradin's calf was bitten by a mosquito. It started to run and kick. The mullah at once began to beat the bull. "Why do that?" one of his neighbours asked. "People learn bad conduct from their associates," said Mullah Nazradin. He won't listen. Mullah Nazradin was always quarrelling with the mayor of his village. When the mayor was very ill, the people called the mullah to say a prayer over him. "Sorry," said Nazradin. "I would like to do so, but I can't. Get someone else. He is always angry with me, so he won't listen." Pussycat. Strange to relate, Mullah Nazradin had never seen a cat in his life when he found one on the road into town one day. "Aha," he thought, "this may be a rare animal. It is pretty enough. I will try to sell it." The first man he met said, "Oh, what a pretty pussy." Nazradin said, "Do you want to buy it?" "No, thank you," said the man. "I know what they are called, anyway," said Nazradin. Presently another man came past. "It is scarcely more than a kitten," he said. "Do you want to buy it?" asked the mullah. "No, I don't." "They have more than one name," observed Nazradin to himself. Then, when he reached town, someone else came up to him. "What a beautiful Persian," he said. "Do you want to buy it?" asked the mullah. "No," said the man. "Everyone is ignorant of the true name of these animals, that is obvious," said Nazradin to himself, "and they cover up by inventing names for them. Therefore they must be exceedingly rare." He spent the whole of the day trying to find a buyer and spent half a silver coin on meat for the animal. Then he found himself in front of a pet shop. "How much will you give me for this one?" he asked the owner. "It's only a tabby, and not worth a single copper," said the man. Nazradin let the cat jump down. "A day's work, half a dirham, and nothing. You may have plenty of names, but you're not worth much when it comes down to facts, are you?" Flog him. When Nazradin was a magistrate, a man was brought before him for being drunk and disorderly. The mullah said, Give him 40 lashes if he is ever found drunk again." The verdict was duly entered in the books. "You will suffer for this," fumed the drunk, "for I am a high official of the government, and if I am flogged I'll have you flayed." "According to law," said Nazradin, "we cannot alter a court's decision, but we can add something. Amend that sentence to read, and also give 300 lashes to anyone who brings this man in for punishment." The Holes of Moles. When you see moles' holes, don't you ever wonder what they do with the earth that they dig out, leaving nothing visible outside? No, I do not. Why not, Muller? Because I know that they start at the other end, in the middle of the earth, and fill up the hole as they go along. But how do they get into the middle of the earth in the first place? I regret to inform you that today is my day for answering only one question at a time. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.